The day before he died, he finally told the world the truth. He'd been living with it for years. Almost nobody outside his closest circle knew. This is Freddie Mercury. He was born Farooq Bulsara on September 5, 1946, in Stone Town, Zanzibar, to Parsi parents who'd immigrated from Western India. His family followed the Zoroastrian faith, one of the oldest religions in the world, and the household he grew up in was shaped by that heritage, even as it moved across continents. As a child, he was sent to boarding school in India, where he studied piano and first started performing in a school band. Even then, teachers and classmates noticed something. A kid who came alive the moment he was in front of people, and who otherwise stayed fairly reserved. In the mid-1960s, political unrest in Zanzibar forced his family to flee to England. He enrolled at Ealing Art College in London, studying graphic design, and it was there that he found the people who would define the rest of his life, a growing circle of musicians orbiting the same small scene. By the late 1960s, he'd started performing under a new name, Freddie. A few years later, in 1970, he joined with guitarist Brian May and drummer Roger Taylor to form a band. He's the one who picked the name, Queen. Bassist John Deacon joined soon after, completing the lineup that would go on to become one of the most influential rock bands in history. Freddie also designed the band's logo himself, an intricate crest built around the zodiac signs of all four members, drawing on his art school training in a way most fans never realized. Here's what made Freddie Mercury different from almost every other frontman of his era. He refused to be limited to one style. Queen's early albums moved fluidly between hard rock, vaudeville, progressive experimentation, and operatic excess, often within the same song. In 1975, that instinct produced Bohemian Rhapsody. 6 minutes long, structurally unlike anything else on the radio, blending a ballad, an operatic midsection, and a hard rock finale into a single track that record executives thought was commercial suicide. It became one of the best-selling singles in UK chart history, and decades later is still regularly named one of the greatest songs ever recorded. Live, Freddie was something else entirely. A 4-octave vocal range, a stage presence built on total command. He didn't just perform for an audience, he conducted them. And one of the clearest examples of that happened in 1985 at Live Aid, in front of over 70,000 people at Wembley Stadium and a television audience of hundreds of millions. Queen's set that day is still widely considered one of the greatest live performances in rock history. 20 minutes that reportedly stole the entire show from a lineup packed with legends. Behind the theatrics, Freddie's personal life was something he guarded closely at a time when doing otherwise carried real consequences. In 1969, he met Mary Austin, and the two fell deeply in love. He proposed in 1973. A few years into their relationship, he told her the truth about his sexuality. He was attracted to men as well as women. The engagement ended, but something more durable didn't. Freddie and Mary stayed close for the rest of his life. He would later describe her as the one person he trusted completely, closer than any romantic partner who came after. In his final years, it was Mary who helped care for him. He went on to have relationships with men, including a long relationship with David Minns in the mid-1970s, and later, for the final 7 years of his life, with Jim Hutton, who stayed by his side through everything that came after. By the early 1980s, rumors about Freddie's health had already started circulating in the press, feeding off his increasingly private lifestyle and the general climate of fear and stigma surrounding a disease the public barely understood yet. He was diagnosed HIV positive in 1987. He kept that diagnosis almost entirely private, even as tabloids grew more aggressive, photographing him from a distance, publishing speculative stories, treating his declining health as a story to chase rather than a life to respect. Here's the part of this story that says as much about the era as it does about Freddie himself. This was a time when an HIV or AIDS diagnosis could end careers, destroy relationships, and invite open cruelty, even from people who claimed to love an artist's work. Freddie chose privacy, not out of shame, but as protection, for himself and for the people around him who would have been dragged into the same spotlight without ever agreeing to it. Even as his health declined, he kept working. Queen continued releasing music through the late 1980s, and by most accounts, Freddie pushed himself in the studio with an urgency that his bandmates only fully understood in hindsight. He was, quite literally, racing to finish as much as he could while his body still allowed it. On November 22nd, 1991, after years of media speculation he'd never confirmed, Freddie Mercury released a public statement. He said he'd tested HIV positive and had AIDS, and that he'd kept it private out of respect for the people close to him. By the time that statement reached newspapers, his condition was already severe. He'd lost most of his sight, could barely move, and was drifting in and out of consciousness. He died the following day, November 24th, 1991, at his home in Kensington, London. He was 45 years old. The official cause was bronchial pneumonia, a complication of AIDS. Mary Austin was among the small number of people with him at the end. His death became one of the most significant moments in the public understanding of AIDS. He was, at the time, the most famous person in the world to die from the disease. And his openness in those final hours, brief as it was, did something that years of public health campaigns hadn't fully managed to do. It put a human, deeply beloved face on an illness that a huge portion of the public had spent the 1980s treating as something distant, shameful, or deserved. Just months after his death, treatments that could have meaningfully extended his life became available. He missed that turning point by a matter of months. In the years since, Freddie's bandmates and Mary Austin have helped preserve and shape his legacy, including the establishment of the Mercury Phoenix Trust, which has raised tens of millions of dollars for HIV and AIDS charities worldwide. Queen's music has never really left the culture. New generations keep discovering Bohemian Rhapsody as if it were released yesterday. Here's the part of this story that isn't really about Freddie Mercury at all. We often assume that visibility is always good, that everyone owes the public an explanation of what they're going through. Freddie's story complicates that. He lived in a moment when honesty about who he was or what he was facing could have been used as a weapon against him, and he made a calculated, protective choice to keep his private life private for as long as he possibly could, right up until the very end, when he chose, on his own terms, to finally tell the truth. That wasn't weakness or deception. It was survival in a world that hadn't yet learned how to receive that kind of honesty with any kindness. Freddie Mercury spent his life giving audiences everything on stage: the voice, the presence, the sheer scale of the performance. What he kept for himself until almost the very last moment was the one thing the world had made clear it wasn't ready to hold gently. This was Undertone. One life, one truth, told finally on his own terms. If you want more stories like this one, subscribe. There's more where this came from.